On a quiet December morning in 1958, Portland, Oregon looked like a Christmas card. Cold mist clung to the rooftops. Thin frost covered the lawns. Church bells echoed through the neighborhoods. At exactly 11 a.m. inside a modest home, the Martin family prepared what should have been an ordinary holiday tradition. Kenneth Martin, a soft-spoken man in his 50s, buttoned up his coat. His wife, Barbara, packed a couple of snacks. There were three girls, Barbie, Virginia, and Susan, pulled on their gloves and scarves, chattering in excitement. Their plan wasn't unusual. It was something many Oregon families did. Drive into the Columbia River Gorge, gather evergreen branches, and return home to decorate for Christmas. Kenneth left the washer full of wet laundry. Barbara left dishes soaking in the sink. Lights were left on. Everything suggested they were coming back. The family piled into their 1954 cream and red Country Square station wagon, a classy heavy wood panel car built for long drives. Witness accounts placed them in various small towns. At 12:30 p.m. in the Dalles, the family stopped for gas. The station attendant remembered the girls, polite, smiling, laughing, nothing strange. At 2 o'clock p.m., Hood River, they were spotted at a rest stop buying snacks. A waitress said Kenneth looked distracted, maybe tired but not upset. At 4 o'clock p.m., the sky was beginning to dim. Winter nights came early. They never returned home. Back in Portland, the Martins' house stayed lit. Neighbors expected the family home by dinner. When no one returned, nobody panicked, not yet. It wasn't until the next morning, December 8th, when Kenneth didn't show up for work, that alarms began to ring. While Barbie was noted absent from her morning classes at Grand Hill High School, both Susan and Virginia were reported absent by their teachers at Rose City School. The family was officially reported missing that evening by Kenneth's boss. The police were contacted, phones were dialed, but the lines between Portland and the Gorge remained silent. Search teams were dispatched, but what they found were scattered clues, unsettling, conflicted, and very frustrating. The police investigated the residence at approximately 11 o'clock p.m. The house had been left undisturbed. A load of laundry was in the washing machine, and dishes from the previous day were left on a drying rack in the kitchen. There was also a substantial amount of money in the Martins' bank accounts. That wasn't until a volunteer searcher found tire tracks leading off a cliff near the Dalles, which reportedly matched the tires on the Martins' Ford. Paint chips recovered at this location were sent to the FBI for analysis, and it was determined that the paint was the same paint used on the make and model of the Ford. Based on the possibility that the Martins' vehicle might have been plunged into the river, the United States Army Corps of Engineers lowered the level of the river by 5 feet, which was searched with sonar technology, but yielded no results. On the afternoon of May 3rd, so about 6 months after the disappearance, the body of Susan was discovered on the north bank of the Columbia River, near Commerce, Washington, roughly 70 miles west of the Dalles. Her identity was positively confirmed via dental records. The next morning, the body of Virginia was discovered near Bonneville Dam, roughly 46 miles west of the Dalles, also confirmed via dental records. Susan's body was taken to the Clark County Medical Examiner's office before being transferred to Multnomah County and Portland for autopsies. One of the technicians who had taken fingerprints prior to the autopsies indicated to the medical examiner what they believed to be bullet holes in the heads of each of the girls' bodies. In the medical examiner's report, no such injuries were found, and the cause of death for both of the girls was declared as drowning. Traces of metal, including aluminum, were recovered from Susan's clothing. The spot on the riverbank where the drill rig encountered a submerged object and where the car is suspected to have gone into the river was directly opposite an aluminum smelting plant. Rupert Gilmouth, the sheriff of Hood River County at the time, suspected that the drilling rig had overturned the Martins' car at the bottom of the river and dislodged one of the doors, allowing the bodies of Susan and Virginia to escape and surface downstream. Further searches of the water were undertaken by both sonar and helicopter. The search for Kenneth, Barbara, and Barbie was suspended after a search diver nearly drowned. Police theorized that the Martins may have died as a result of Kenneth crashing their vehicle into the Columbia River. In 1961, a resident of Commerce wrote a letter to the Oregon Journey stating that they were parked with a companion in Cascade Locks on December 7, 1958, and had witnessed a vehicle proceeding under the railroad tracks leading toward the locks. Moments later, they heard screaming, but upon investigating, found nothing. In December of 1966, Donald, the only surviving member of the family, inherited the family's modest estate, which had been mandated probate for 7 years. Now, Donald had a pretty rocky relationship with his parents. Upon joining the Navy, he never stayed in touch, and there were rumors of financial disputes between him and Kenneth. And because the Martins were such a quiet, respected middle-class family, this kind of tension stood out. The police found a .38 caliber revolver wrapped in a pair of jeans near an abandoned stolen car close to where the Martins were last seen. The gun had been owned by Donald himself. It had been stolen from his home during a burglary earlier that year, and one chamber showed signs of having been fired. Now, even though Donald claimed the gun was stolen long before, the fact that his revolver showed up near the disappearance site raised serious questions. Investigators were never able to fully explain how or why that gun ended up there. Donald's behavior after the disappearance struck some investigators as cold and detached, and detectives just described him as someone who just did not care that his family was missing. He just told people that he assumed the family would just turn up. Now, some people interpreted his attitude as normal for someone in shock, but others felt it was highly suspicious. Several theories were explored: the inheritance and financial motive. Kenneth and Barbara owned several assets, including property and savings. If Donald had major financial problems, he could potentially benefit. But despite all the suspicions, there were no fingerprints, no witnesses, no confirmed sightings, and Donald was in the Navy at the time. No hard evidence ever tied Donald to the disappearance, and claimed he was nowhere near the gorge. And the gun being stolen months earlier gave him plausible deniability. Now, the police were divided. Some thought he was the best suspect, others felt the clues were a coincidence. Without the car or bodies, they didn't have enough to build a case. Now, some investigators believed if this was not an accident, Donald Martin is the most logical suspect. But again, no physical evidence has ever confirmed it. He later moved to Hawaii and became a teacher at James Campbell High School. He would then pass away in October of 2004 at the age of 73. The police consistently suspected foul play in the Martins' disappearance, based on the evidence of the tire tracks that indicated their vehicle was deliberately pushed off the cliff. Also troubling were the reporting sightings of the family at dusk on the north bank of the river in Washington, while the tire tracks placed them on the south side of the river in Oregon. This would suggest that their car would have fallen over the cliff after nightfall. The arrest of the two convicts the day after the family's disappearance for car theft was also noted, though police were unable to determine whether the incidents were related. A Portland detective who died in 1988 theorized that the family had met with foul play and that their murders would be solved once their car was discovered. The cremated remains of Susan and Virginia remained at the Riverview Abbey Mausoleum, unclaimed for over a decade after their deaths. The urns containing their remains were retrieved by an unknown individual. The girl's grandmother, Margaret Martin, had died the day before, December 29th, and the girl's cremated remains were claimed while funeral arrangements were being made for her. Now, there are three possibilities in regards to a theory. One is that this could have been just an accident. They simply may have slid off the road at night, went into the river, and the current scattered the bodies. The problem with this theory is that there were no skid marks, no glass, debris, or damage at the suspected cliff area. Road conditions weren't extremely icy. The route didn't make sense for a nighttime drive further east. Two bodies surfaced far from each other. Three bodies remained missing for nearly 70 years, and Kenneth was an experienced driver. Now, this theory is possible, but it doesn't explain everything. The second theory is that foul play was involved. Someone may have followed them or forced them off the road. The problem with this theory is that there are no witnesses, no reports of any strangers with them, no known enemies, no ransom. A random murder with no motive is very unlikely. And the stolen Chevy and gun have never been firmly connected to the Martins. The final theory is that there may have been some sort of confrontation or planned meeting gone wrong. This is the theory that investigators keep circling back to, and it would involve their eldest son, Donald. Now, the pieces that don't add up is Donald's gun ended up near the scene. Now, this is the biggest screw up in the case, because his .38 revolver, stolen months earlier, shows up wrapped in someone's jeans near an abandoned stolen car close to the area the Martins vanished. Now, that's not a mere coincidence. That's proximity. Another piece that didn't add up is the Martins drove much further east than needed. Their goal was to collect Christmas decorations. You can literally do that in Troutdale, Oregon, in Corbett, or in Cascade Locks. But for some reason, they kept going east, further and further. Can never explain why they were so far from home, unless they were meeting someone, which would have me believe that they were murdered by someone possibly connected to their son, and that's likely how their bodies ended up off the cliff, because the likelihood of someone just driving off a cliff randomly is just very unlikely, unless if something was wrong with the brakes, but that can never be proven. Whether they were murdered or if their son was involved remains a mystery.